Welcome to the Little Miss Movies podcast, where two movie-obsessed parents make their 11-year-old watch movies she'd never watch otherwise. This is Season 2, Episode 4, Scarface. Hello, welcome once more to the Little Miss Movies podcast. This is, we're actually doing this a second time. I'm going to pull the curtain back because Gable fell asleep during our first attempt because we tried to do 2 episodes back to back, and Gable gets sleepy.
In her defense, it was like 10 o'clock at night on a school night.
Whatever.
We're questionable parents sometimes.
Whatever. I'm Josh. I'm a writer of things. And I'm the father of Little Miss Movies.
I'm Christina. I'm also a writer of things and the mother of Little Miss Movies.
And that sound you hear in the background is
It's
Cole.
our dog.
There
He's
is.
a
Heckle.
licker and eater of things. and the
Including Girl Scout cookies.
and the dog of Little Miss
Little Miss
Movies.
He eats many things, including Girl Scout cookies, which I'm selling.
There you go. Good work.
I got a good one. I'm Gable. I'm Lois Movies. I'm 11. And I play video games. And I'm almost done with the story mode of Splatoon. No one cares about that.
I don't know what that means, although I did discover at our last Girl Scout meeting that apparently a thing young people do these days is watch other people play video games
Yeah,
on
because
YouTube.
you learn stuff.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
you knew
Daddy
that was
does
Very
it too.
profitable.
Oh, okay.
Daddy does it. Like, when we were doing Skyward Sword, you would watch it.
Well, I don't watch them for like fun.
Pleasure.
I watch them for helping
I
me
watched someone
cheat.
doing. I watched someone.
I watch them as a notorious cheat.
I watched someone do Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild because it was very funny.
Like the whole game?
Yeah, pretty
That's
much.
insane.
Yeah.
That is completely insane. What is
But
wrong
like
with
they
you?
skipped. They didn't like skipped over some stuff.
So just the story?
Yeah, pretty much. Now they're doing all the Koroks, and it's like
Nope.
7 episodes so far.
So we now really are officially that podcast of people just talking about random stuff before they get to the actual topic at hand.
You're welcome to start whenever you want.
So our movie this week, I got to pick, and I'm very excited about, and I'm a little bit surprised. It didn't occur to me much earlier to pick this film. We watched the 1932 gangster classic directed by Howard Hawks, Scarface.
Better known to some as Scarface.
Not at all. To you, honey.
That sounds
To
a
you.
bit wrong.
Scarface.
Sometimes referred to as Scarface, the shame of a nation.
What?
Yes, because we can get into that once we talk about the
Also,
censorship
we-
issues.
Like you said, we're not talking about the 1980 something version.
We're definitely not talking about the 1983.
I looked up the yesterday or whenever we watched it. Whenever we watched it, I looked up the running length, and I got one that was like it was from 1983,
Mhm.
and it was like it's 2.5 hours long. And I was like, what? This classic movie was made in 1983.
I mean, technically now they do consider 1983 classics. It's very strange.
Ugh, is it really? But no, we are not talking about the Al Pacino, Brian De Palma version of Scarface, which is a remake of this film.
Scarface.
Yeah.
Not Scarface.
Not Scarface.
No, people were still calling it Scarface.
So, Gable, do you want to give us your rundown of what you think this movie was about?
A gang.
No. I mean, it's just not. It is not about a gang. It is very clearly not about a gang.
A mafia dude trying to be the mafia boss, and Devorak exists. And there's X's every time someone dies.
There are X's every time someone dies.
There you go. And Devorak is
what
there.
is the quote-unquote mafia dude? What does he do?
He kills people?
But how? Like, what is that symbol in a broader sense?
I
He's
don't
trying
know.
What is he trying to do?
Rise to power.
There we go.
Like
There
in
we
The
go.
Godfather.
But what character?
Entire episode.
But what character is he like in The Godfather?
Michael?
No.
Right? Is that right? No, it's
No,
not. Santino? I don't remember any names, okay?
So no, it's so
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
It is the rise to power, the rise and fall, which is yeah, what Michael was in The Godfather. But yeah, he's in Scarface. Tony Comante, played by Paul Muni. I mean, he's very rash. He is very short tempered. He doesn't think things through. So who is that like in The Godfather? Santino. How well does that go for Santino
right.
in The Godfather?
He dies.
How well does it go for Paul Muni in Scarface?
He dies.
Yeah. So.
He's the last one to die, though, so it's pretty good.
And he's the last man standing.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, that is true.
And was the second one standing.
And those metal shutters really don't work out for him.
They really don't.
I think had he actually deployed them, yes.
As I was saying there, I'd be like, yeah, we're going to be okay.
If you watch any of the Purge movies, you learn that the first step of taking advantage of your security measures is to use them. Yes.
Instead of staying there being like, yeah, this is going to help us.
Yes.
Pull it partly down. We're going to be okay. Pull it down again.
He's very boastful, and that also proves to be his undoing. Yes.
His demise.
That is his demise. So, what were your impressions of this film?
It was all right.
I just wanted one time when you say do your impression, I wanted to do an impression.
I would have done it for Simpsons.
Pretty hot. Is this what you wanted her to do?
Yes.
I would have done it for Simpsons. But you guys were the one. I was the one hosting it, so yeah.
What were your impressions of the movie, Gable?
I'm not doing an impression of the movie.
But what did you? Oh my god!
What did you think of it?
Can you give me what you thought of it beyond?
It was all right.
Beyond, it was all right.
I mean, it was confusing, but The Godfather was more confusing. What?
The Godfather was more confusing?
Yes.
Okay.
But this is very confusing as well.
But what was confusing?
I don't know, just in general, it was confusing. I don't know.
All right, but I mean, he was somebody who, was kind of double-crossing everyone in his rise to power. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay.
And Anne was the best.
Are you just saying that?
No, I'm not. She was actually the best.
So the film, second billing on this film is an actress named Anne Devorak. And for those of you who might be unaware, although I doubt it if you're listening to this, you're probably aware, that I am, I think safe to say, the world's foremost expert on Anne Devorak. Josh?
I agree.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
I think, or are you just saying that because you think I'll slap you or
Yes,
something?
maybe.
You're cowering. No, so I've been, I wrote a book on Anne that came out in 2013 that I worked on for about 15 years. And I've been collecting movie memorabilia or anything else related to Anne Devorak for about 25 years now.
You rescued her her honeymoon album?
Yes, I do have her scrapbook of honeymoon photos from her 1932 international honeymoon with her first husband, Leslie Fenton. We got married at her house. You were aware of that, right, Gable?
Yeah.
So Anne,
I have a picture of you guys in my room because you guys gave me a picture of you guys at some point.
Of us at our wedding?
Yes.
That was held at Anne's estate, her Encino estate that she had built with Leslie Fenton. So
yeah.
I love Anne.
I wasn't alive, so I didn't get to see that.
You did not. You visited it though. You did visit that house.
I did.
Mm-hmm, you visited it when you were an infant, and then when you were, I guess a little less than a year old before that owner sold it.
Thank you.
So I do have some pictures of you there. So yeah. So Anne, to love me is to love Anne, and so this
what
is.
What if I like Anne, but there's other things I love more than Anne, but I still love you.
But you do love Anne. I'm not saying Anne has to, right? She's all around our house.
Yeah, but
you see Anne all the time.
And she's dressed pretty scantily in this movie. You do see quite a bit of her.
You see quite a bit of Anne. Yeah, I know. This is only the second movie you've seen with her.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising that I haven't made you watch more Anne movies.
The first movie I saw was during the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I don't know why I haven't made you watch Anne movies, because I did read my entire book to you.
Yeah, you did. Your entire book to me.
So you asked me to. I didn't make you.
I did.
I like to clarify.
I feel like you're like, do you want to read my book? And I was like, sure.
No,
and
you asked.
Like, okay.
You asked to.
Oh well, okay.
I think it was one of your stalling tactics to not go to sleep.
Oh, hey, Mama, will you start reading your other book?
The Jane Russell. Or you want to read Anne again?
Yeah,
I'll read you my Anne.
Let's read Anne again.
I'll read you my Anne Devorak.
Stay up to 10:30 reading Anne again.
No, but in all honesty, what was your impression of Anne in this movie?
She was good.
How so?
She was the best. She's a good actress.
She is a good actress. And this was actually her first film, which I think is kind of amazing. She had been employed at MGM Studios as a chorus girl for a couple of years, so she did have a lot of experience in front of the cameras, but this was actually her first like acting role. And she was 19 when she got cast and had just turned 20 when she started it. So I think it's a pretty astounding performance. And
For a 20-year-old, yeah.
yeah, a 20-year-old who had never acted before. And I think like Howard Hughes, who produced the film, and Howard Hawks were so impressed with her that she did end up getting second billing behind Paul Muni in this film, which is quite amazing.
Bye, Cole.
Our dog is very restless
Bye,
tonight.
Cole.
Yeah. But yeah, I think she's incredible. I think this is probably her best role. Certainly, I think arguably the best movie she ever made, even though I know you like Three on a Match better. I think this is the best movie she ever made. And I think one of the things that is so striking about her performance is that this movie's, really 1930. It was filmed in 1931 and came out in early 32. So it's very early on in the history of talkie films. Talkie films or talking pictures, sound films, I guess I should say.
Talkie films.
And I think a lot of performances at that time, I think, tend to be over exaggerated because you had people coming out of the silent era or people coming off of the stage where they had to kind of play to the rafters. And so I think Anne's performance in this film,
It's very natural.
it is. Yeah, she was a very just kind of naturally talented actress. And I think I love her voice. I think her voice is very contemporary sounding, and she doesn't, have like the affectation that a lot of actors at that time had. And so I feel like you could, take Anne out of that film and put her into a current movie and she would just kind of slide in no problem.
Are you gonna edit her out of one of her old movies and put her into a current movie?
I am not going to do that, not least because I would have no idea how to do that.
I could probably help you.
I don't think that's something I need to do.
Yeah, it is.
What did you think of, because it was a breakout role for Anne, but it was also a breakout role for George Raft.
Who's that?
George Raft is the one who ends up marrying her in the film and who's Tony's best friend who flips the coin.
He was all right.
He was all right, that's all you got to say?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's quite charming. I remember when I first saw this movie when I was probably in college was when I saw it, and being kind of unaware of George Raft and being quite taken with him. And I don't know if you remember Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
Remember that movie with Marilyn and Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis?
Yeah.
And he's Spats. He's the main mob boss in it.
Cool.
And that's, that's 59. So that's almost 30 years later that he's playing that role. And kind of riffing on.
What did you think about the violence in the movie?
It wasn't that bad.
You don't think it was that bad?
No.
So I mean, it's not. Movies at that time weren't gory, because I think now you watch movies and there's like blood and guts, and back then they didn't do that, so you don't see blood. But it is an incredibly violent film for that era. So it didn't impact you?
No, it wasn't that gory or anything.
A lot of people die though.
A lot of people
yeah,
die.
but like compared to like other movies that we watch that are gory.
So she's that desensitized.
Like compared to Godfather?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I meant more like the
Halloween?
Not really. Like not you can't.
Well, that's because good horror doesn't, like, things that are really disturbing, they don't have to show it to you.
I feel like Jaws.
Well, same with Jaws. They
Yeah,
don't
Jaws.
show
They
much.
don't show a whole lot. So
It's being eaten by a shark.
Yeah. And I think this movie conveys a tremendous amount of violence. And I think it's also kind of impressive, a lot of the scenes and the stunts. So they have like car chases, which you didn't really see a lot of that in 1932.
Okay, so the violence didn't stir you. But what about all the action? Like, it's weird to see a movie that old that has so much action in it.
I guess.
Right? Because like when you think of the other, even like Casablanca or like the Maltese Falcon or sort of the other movies from around that time, they don't really have, most of the action is like, maybe one person shoots a gun. Whereas in
And
this, there's
that's
like,
it.
yeah, and like in this, there's like Tommy guns, and there's like the car chase that ends with a big car wreck.
Then there's all the cops shooting guns through the
Mm-hmm.
non-bulletproof the non-steel shuttered.
They aren't closed yet. They just aren't closed yet.
Yeah, so I think
we're gonna be okay.
So I think you'd see, like in the silent era, there was more action because they weren't hampered by the sound equipment. In like a lot of the comedians, like Buster Keaton, in Harold Lloyd, there'd be action, or you would have the Western films, with horse chases. But to have this early on in the sound era, to have the car crashes and the car chases is pretty fantastic, and I think it still holds up. I think it's still incredibly effective.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and at the time, so there was this movie that was a gangster film, set in the Prohibition era, and then there were a couple of others. So there was The Public Enemy with James Cagney, who you've seen some of his films, and then there was another one, Little Caesar, with Edward G. Robinson, and all three of them were tremendously influential and kind of launched the gangster genre in a way, which has always, this type of subject matter has always been incredibly popular with audiences. But I think is interesting. Do you know what other movie Howard Hawks directed that you've seen?
What? Oh yeah,
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes?
yeah, I know.
Did you?
No, I
did.
totally knew. I mean,
I totally knew. I don't just said what because it's how I answer everything.
It is how I answer everything.
But what do you think? Isn't that kind of crazy that the
Yeah.
same guy directed these two incredibly different films?
Gentlemen for Blondes is better though.
Well, it's I don't even know that you could compare, even though it's the same director. I don't know if you can even, really compare the two because they're so
Gentlemen
different.
Prefer Blondes is better.
Gable prefers blonde. But also, and Howard Hawks was just an extraordinary director, and he was very much, I think he was very much an actor's director. I think that Jane Russell's performance in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is probably the best of her career, and same with Scarface. Is probably the best performance of Anne's career. So he was just a tremendous, tremendous director.
the other thing about this movie, Gable, that is of note is it is the first movie to show what is called a Tommy gun.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the gun he uses with the rat-a-tat-a-tat.
Rat-a-tat-tat-tat, yeah.
With the like round thing on it,
Yeah.
which was like, it was relatively new when it was shown, and it became sort of like the trademark gun of all the gangsters of the gangster era. And this was the first time it was shown in film.
Cool.
And so even crazier is back then they hadn't quite figured out squibs. So we've talked about squibs before. Squibs are
it's
right
like,
when
Yeah, it's like when you like shoot someone and like the blood comes. It looks like
Yeah,
they hit
so
them.
it's-
It's like the blood comes out. It's like the fake blood.
So
Right.
James Caan was just covered with squibs for
so
the
they're like tiny pieces
Santino.
they're like little pieces of explosive and blood packets, usually
Yeah.
condoms actually filled with blood, which you should see a doctor for, just in case you're out there. But they didn't have those, so they couldn't do it. So a lot of times when the guys are falling down, they're just sort of like, oh, and falling over. Weirdly, what they would do though is to make it look real and to make the facade sort of like explode, with the blast from the bullets, is they would hire like ex-military sharpshooters and like gun experts, and they would shoot real guns with real rounds.
That sounds totally like it would never ever go wrong. It's
Yeah.
so foolproof.
And the actors would be in they would be shooting at the actors, but at the wall, hoping that this like brick facade that they made is gonna block the actors.
Sounds so foolproof.
So
So like no
totally
one
fine.
ever
Yeah, totally
would
fine.
would get
Got
hit
hurt.
by that.
What could ever go wrong?
ever go wrong?
Yeah, Hollywood is not known for treating people well with guns. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's
And a lot of other things.
And a lot of other things. But oof. Yeah, not great.
Do you have questions for us about the film?
I mean, not really. You answered a lot of things.
I mean, this movie's on dozens of best film of all time lists. Like essentially, it's like it's always on the best like crime movies of all time. It's on best, like AFI always has it on their list for best movies of all time.
Yeah, and like people always seem to not know it. Like they know about the '83 one, but not necessarily
The 83 one's
32.
so bombastic and ridiculous, though, that I think people like.
And has really permeated the culture. Like,
Say hello to my
it's
little friend.
surprising. Yeah, it's surprising. But this film, when it came out, was incredibly controversial. It did come out during the pre-code era, which we've talked about before, and so that was this time period where there was that production code that was established. That was sort of it was the studios regulating themselves for content to prevent the federal government from doing it, and so it was a list of kind of do's and don'ts, and so kind of between like 1930 to 1934, it wasn't really enforced. Like the code was not enforced, and that's why you do have like movies like Three on a Match, which just has all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So even though Scarface came out during the pre-code era, when the code wasn't really being enforced, the production code administration, who was kind of monitoring things and administering the code, really went after this film. And I think, they were not fans of Howard Hughes. He was kind of considered like a Hollywood outsider, and he came from money and was, considered like this kind of brash playboy. And so, so the film, was certainly subjected to a lot of censorship requests, like some of which Hughes would ultimately acquiesce to a little bit, and a lot of them he wouldn't. So when the movie started, there is this really kind of ridiculous disclaimer about crime in this country, and it is our responsibility to take care of it.
And what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, which is ridiculous, right?
What are you gonna do about it, Mama? What are you gonna do about it?
And that was something like that was not anything Howard Hawks
wanted
to put on the film.
So dumb. What are you gonna do about it?
And then there is a scene kind of in the middle of the movie that's in like a police commissioner's office, I think. And it's a ridiculous scene that is completely out of place, right?
Yeah.
It's like badly shot. Like the footage is like different quality. Yeah, it's amazing.
Because that is 100% not Howard Hawks. He did not shoot that, and that was something that was inserted after the fact, and Hughes kind of did it to appease the censors. Some of the publicity that you see at the time, and it did have a re-release a few years later. It's called Scarface: The Shame of a Nation. So that's to make it sound like, this is bad. We're not glamorizing this. Although, it was shown to like producers before it was released. And it was actually shown to police administrators who signed off on it and said it's fine. It's not glammy. It's not glamorizing, this guy at all. And then the other thing, it's called Scarface, and the character is very loosely based on Al Capone, who was one of the most like notorious gangsters of the Prohibition era, who was out of Chicago. And so, the character is very clearly inspired by him. And because they didn't, even though the movie is called Scarface, they never used the term Scarface in the actual film.
Except for when Anne says Scarface and they dubbed over as a murderer.
So after Tony guns down Gino, and Anne's crying over his body, and then she calls him Scarface, and you can see that she's mouthing the word Scarface, but they dubbed murderer over it because that was one of the concessions that was made. For whatever reason, they couldn't use the term Scarface like in the film. So Hughes, again made some concessions. This is like the last film he produces for almost a decade. The next time he does produce a film, it is The Outlaw, which initially was starring Jane Russell, which was going to be directed by Howard Hawks, but it fell apart. And for that film, he also got into trouble with the Production Code Administration. And by that time, the code's really being enforced. And Hughes just did not make, really didn't make concessions by that time. And would ultimately had distribution with Fox that went away, and would, ultimately, I think release it himself.
So one of the things I love about this movie, that's like the story of this movie, is not only did he have problems with like the legitimate people having a problem with it, Al Capone had a problem with it too, right? Like, didn't Ben Hecht was like approached early on by gangsters, like when the movie was first getting going.
Because Ben Hecht was the scriptwriter.
Yeah, because wasn't he a crime reporter beforehand?
He had been, yeah.
And he got approached by a couple of Capone's goons to try and this movie needs to end.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes that he managed to convince them through like telling the story of the movie, which is like totally the story of Al Capone. He managed to convince them that it's totally not about Al Capone. It's about these other guys who
have giant scars on their face.
Yes. And that, in fact, what the movie will do is it'll make Al Capone look even more awesome. And they were like, we like the way you think, mister. And so he's sort of like, he managed to somehow convince them both that it wasn't about Al Capone, so it's okay. However, if it is about Al Capone, look how cool he looks. And so they were, they sort of like let him go.
And there was an alternate ending, which we didn't watch with you. It is on our DVD, where Tony like gets arrested and I think he goes to the electric chair or gets hung to like show justice being served, even though he's like shot dead and like ends up face down in a puddle. But apparently that wasn't justice enough. So that alternate ending, not shot by Howard Hawks, was also filmed. So the movie does have a fairly like notorious history, but unlike The Outlaw, it's actually a really good movie.
The Outlaw's so bad.
The Outlaw's so bad.
I don't know if this is one. I don't know. This is like an IMDb one that I don't know if it's true or not. But so there's the scene with Boris Karloff with Frankenstein's monster, who goes bowling. Who's in hiding and doesn't want it so nobody can know where he is, and then he's like,
goes bowling.
I have to go bowling.
That doesn't really make
Perhaps
sense.
it's my turn. I can't miss my weekly game.
Yeah, that doesn't quite make sense.
Both is what I do. And while bowling, he gets shot down. Apparently, there was an actual gangster who got shot because he was in hiding and he went out bowling.
Oh.
It was one of Al Capone's men.
So it's not that far-fetched.
And it happened after the movie.
Oh, so the movie wasn't inspired by
Wow.
it. It was life imitating art.
Apparently.
It's like The Simpsons when they predict stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Kamala Harris wore Lisa's inauguration outfit at her inauguration.
See?
Just like it.
That's the thing.
Same
Just
thing.
like it. That is like when, as we were watching it, it never occurred to me how ridiculous it is that he is out bowling.
I can't help it.
after,
I simply have to go bowling.
after his entire gang's been gunned
And it's
down.
terrible, like his accent where he's like trying to do like a
Mm.
New York or like a Chicago something, and he just gives up at some point and he just doesn't do
Stop.
it.
That man's an
He is.
adorable saint.
He is, it's true. So cute.
Is it that time?
Or are you done?
You usually like start laughing and then you're like, it's that time again? So it usually happens.
We're thinking if we have anything else we want to tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I will say Anne, so Karen Morley, who plays Poppy, the blonde.
Yeah.
So she was actually offered her choice of either role, of either Poppy or Cheska. And she knew Cheska was the better role of the two. But she was friends with Anne because she had been under contract. Karen Morley had been under contract at MGM, not as a dancer. She was cast, so she was, definitely had a more solid career at the time than Anne. And she knew that Anne was desperate to break out of the chorus and hadn't. And so she knew that Anne would be perfect for the role of Cheska and just needed to introduce Anne to Howard Hawks. And so Hawks was he had a party at his house. I think he liked to do team building. So he had a party at his house with Paul Muni and George Raft and invited Karen Morley, who had been cast, and some other people involved in the film. And she called Anne. So Anne, put on an evening gown, dressed to the nines, and brought her to this party that Howard Hawks was throwing. And Anne knew that George Raft would be playing the character that would be her love interest. And so she went up to George Raft and started dancing in front of him.
Nice.
And he, and George Raft was a dancer, actually. Like, that's how he got his start, he was a dancer. And so he got up with Anne and they just put on this great show, the two of them dancing together. And that absolutely caught Howard Hawks' eye. And he, did a screen test for Anne and cast her. And supposedly that interaction with them was just so dynamic. That's why you have that scene in the movie where Anne's trying to seduce him onto the dance floor, because that was something. She's amazing. Shut up. She's amazing.
Shut up.
Because, Gable, I want you to remember, when it comes time that you're courting somebody, I want you to do a soft shoe shuffle.
That was what she was doing at MGM at the time.
Mhm.
Oh, she is hot. She is
No.
I know, you just don't tap.
Gorgeous.
Tapping don't get you nowhere. That's right,
She is
Gable. No,
amazing.
Gable. It is whenever, if there's a boy that you like, that you're hoping to get up to mischief with, the only way to make sure is if you tap dance in front of him.
You're trying to get her to repel
Yeah.
guys, aren't you?
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Gable, you're starting tap dancing lessons immediately.
She's amazing. She looks stunning. She looks
Who,
stunning
me
in that
or
scene.
Anne?
Anne.
You too, honey.
Thanks.
Especially when you
Anne
tap
looks
dance.
Stunning.
Ha-cha-cha.
Don't talk trash about my
It's
Anne.
the only thing in the movie that's ridiculous, but man, is it ridiculous. It's very strange. I just like the idea that she was at the party and she walked up to George Raft and she was like, she had the hat and the cane. She was doing the Warner Brothers frog thing. It was very weird. It's a very weird moment. Bit erotic.
Did he?
We have a Legend of Zelda. It's a Legend of Zelda little
Amiibo.
stand. It's like an amiibo stand.
Yeah, and it plays
For some
song.
reason,
But a fanfare.
plays the fanfare of whenever you take the Master Sword out because it has a little Master Sword stylus, so it just keeps interrupting us. But it's delightful.
It randomly goes off.
It's great though.
So amazing.
So Gable,
Are we done?
now I think
Are we finally done?
I think your mom's gonna stab us. So yes, Gable,
Okay.
how many would you say of said Zabel? Of said Gable smiles would you give us?
I'm Zabel now?
Yes, you're Zabel.
Hi, I'm Zabel.
How old are you, Zabel?
Hey.
Hey, how many Gable smiles would you give it?
3.246. 9.
So where does that put it in relation to?
Everything else? I
I
don't know.
It's slightly below The Godfather.
Yeah, it is.
Really?
Yes.
I would think the fact that it was short because that makes you happy.
It does make. Oh wait, where was Godfather? Like, was that 2.3.4?
No, The Godfather was like a 3.4, I think.
Oh, this is 3.5029.
For length. For
Yeah,
sure. For
it
sure
gets
length.
an extra 0.2 for length.
It's hard for me because this one has Anne Devorak, but The Godfather has James Caan. Those are my two favorite actors. So it's just neck and neck.
Okay.
We could show her that, what's it called? Woman, is it Bird in a Cage? Woman in a Cage?
Lady in a
Lady in a
Cage.
Cage? Can we show her
Oh,
that
God.
next?
I am always down for Lady in a Cage.
Okay.
Is it Joan
No.
Fontaine? Who is it?
It's Olivia de Havilland.
Olivia de Havilland. Of course.
It's her
Come on.
sister.
I mean, it's pretty good. And she is supposed to be elderly, despite the fact that she's like 40.
I think she's like my age. She might even be younger than me.
And she has an injury, and so she has a elevator installed in her house,
I could see your mom having an elevator installed in her house.
and
Same.
it loses power, and so she gets trapped in the elevator. And a young, handsome James Caan and his friends,
Who's a
break
total
in.
hooligan.
they're hooligans, and they run roughshod over the house as she tries to escape the elevator. She is, in fact, Gable,
A lady.
A lady.
Cage.
in a cage.
Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap this up for you guys instead.
Fine, go on, Gable.
That was our podcast.
What do you
Enjoy.
say? What do you say?
Say goodnight, Daddy.
Good night, Daddy. See, somebody did it. God's sake. We will see you guys
See you guys
in a
next
week.
time.
We'll have to argue about what movie later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. The Little Miss Movies podcast is hosted by Josh Fialkov, Gable Fialkov, and Christina Rice. We're recorded, mixed, and produced in North Hollywood, California. Series art by Gabo. Episode art by Gable Fialkov. Theme song by Josh Fialkov. All contents copyright 2022, Valoria Shines Inc. Visit us online for more at littlemissmovies.com.